Here goes. Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7 p.m. Central. You listen to United Public Radio, 107.7 FM, New Orleans. And what's going on out there? It just seems gross outside. It's like you don't even hardly want to go out there, especially here. I'm sure. I don't know if it's like it's just hot everywhere, isn't it? Everywhere seems just scalding hot.
Well, it's not scalding hot here, but because of that stupid tropical depression that just went by, it's warm here, warmer here than it should be, and steamy. Very humid, very, very humid. Although that's supposed to all clear out in the next day or two, which will be nice.
It's been like that here for months. Like you go outside and your glasses steam up, and it's just like a sauna.
Yeah, it's been it's and this summer in general has been more humid than usual. I mean, it hasn't been as hot here as it's been some other places, obviously, but and I would say just like the temperatures themselves have not been that weird. It's been abnormally humid. And everybody that I know who has lived in this area for a long time will tell you that it's just been way too humid here. It's abnormally humid. It's like mold is everywhere. And there have been 2 or 3 days this summer where I have been so miserable from the humidity that I just didn't even know if I was going to make it, because I hate humidity so much.
That's what it feels like out here. It's just horrible. Like it's worse. I mean, it usually is always horrible, but this year it's definitely much more horrible.
Yeah, I mean, but you're in Florida. We're in New York.
Yeah, it's always horrible.
Yeah, it's like, we like most houses do not have air conditioning around here. I mean, nobody has central air. Like businesses do, businesses and schools and stuff. But like regular houses don't have central air. I mean, you have window units. I have a window unit in my bedroom so I can sleep. But like nobody has central air. And so it's people are miserable, it's just.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know we've been having crazy air conditioning. We got a new air conditioner. It's expensive. My mom bought it, and it's leaking. Like we have to put a thing under it for water. And every time this dude comes out, he's like 250, gets 250 every time he farts. And first time he came out and said it was pet hair, so they got rid of all that, and we thought that would be it. And he showed us how to scrub it, which you would think they would have showed that the first time they were here. But now it's just leaking. It was leaking into other rooms, like through the wall somehow, and you have to put a bucket under it. But it's a brand new air conditioner, just leaking water. I don't know if it's just the humidity or something's wrong with it, but it definitely sucks. And then to come back out, he wants 250. It's like,
jeez.
You were just out here and you didn't fix it the first time.
Yeah.
But it's just nuts. Everything's nutty. And then the guest tonight canceled. And I understand. I mean, he was sick and mentioned it a few days before, but said it would be okay. But then he just did it way before this show. I mean, 2 hours before this show, which that's a little too close. And of course, then he called me Jerry.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even remember my name, which I'm Jerry, everybody. Jerry Seinfeld. No, I'm sure there are a lot of Jerrys out there. Jerry Avalos. But it's just weird. Just crazy weirdness. It just never stops with everything. And then just crazy stuff at Before It's News where I work that just keeps getting crazier. Like one guy that used to work there since 2012 just quit posting, and they said he went on vacation for months, which is not like his personality at all. Like he's fanatical, political. So I know if he's not really posting, he's probably sitting somewhere like with an itch for it or something. But just everywhere just seems nuts. I know Andy was saying a lot of places are changing their their infrastructure with clicks and stuff, and you're getting ripped off a lot more, making a lot less.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. It's
Everything's bottoming out.
Yep. Yep.
It's been crashing. It's been pretty much crashing, isn't it?
Well, it's been weird. It's like, I mean, and this is just my read from what I get, from the cybersecurity world and stuff. But, at the beginning of the year, there was a lot of highly speculative investment in AI. And, AI is going to change our lives. AI is going to be really useful here, really useful here, really useful here. Well, some places have embraced it entirely, but the places that have embraced it are usually sort of like the larger companies, like Google. They're the larger companies that can afford to do their own, not only embrace it, but do their own development in it. And mid-sized companies don't trust it. They can't afford it. It's difficult to know how to integrate it into whatever they're doing. And so they haven't embraced it in the same way. And that's what led to that crash, that Wall Street crash that happened earlier this week, was that there was too much speculative in the first and second quarter, mostly the second quarter, too much speculative investment in AI in one sector of the economy, and it didn't expand. It didn't do what people thought it would do, and so in fact, there were a lot of the layoffs were in the tech sector, in mid-size or mid-size to large companies, and so that's what caused the temporary little crash. It's a temporary thing. It's because it's only one segment of the economy, and the rest of the economy is actually, relative to the rest of the world, doing relatively well. I know a lot of people don't see that because of inflation, but believe me, if the prime interest rate was not as high as it is, the inflation would be much worse. So they are going to have to lower it at some point in order to foster certain types of investment. But it's, but yeah, I mean, it's just nuts right now. People are really emotional, really freaked out. Obviously, what's happened in the political arena has freaked people out for the better, for the worse. But it's just chaos. Everything is chaos.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Everything is chaos.
And everything just seems like it's just escalating to more nuts by the time we get to November, and God knows what's going to happen then.
Well, and regardless of what happens, it's going to be nuts. You know what I mean? I mean, seriously, regardless of what happens, it's going to be crazy.
If she wins, they go crazy. If he wins,
if they win, they go crazy. Right. Either way.
They can all kiss my grits. They can kiss my grits. But let's see what's going on with the schedule here. I've been scheduling through I'm at November. So let's see what we got coming up here. Next week is Robert Sullivan. That's I'm going to have him talk about. I need to tell him this because it was an old book called The Arch of Enoch. So Enoch. He also gets into cinema symbolism. I think he's been on before when you were here. And then August 23rd. This is kind of a strange personality that I know him, but I mean, I'm not like best friends with him, but we've cut up like in Facebook or stuff. But Leo Zagami, and he's on a lot of weird shows. Like he's been on Michelle's show on the network, I'm pretty sure, but he's been on like Alex Jones. But he's like this Italian guy that's has a insight on the Illuminati that's kind of weird. But I think last time I talked to him, he's also Italians for Trump, which he's in another, I guess he lives here. But anyway, he's like, but it's an interesting personality.
Right.
And, He's been on once before, but weird stuff about the Illuminati. And I told him there's this guy named Benjamin Fulford that's very right wing, and he just kind of like makes up news, it seems, about the cabal and the Khazarian mafia. But he was saying this guy's satanic, and I told him, and the guy was just laughing, saying, "No, I'm not satanic," and he made fun of Benjamin Fulford. But he's on a lot of different shows. But Leo Zagami. Let's see, Rich Germeau, Germeau. That is the guy that's Bigfoot. He's also kind of on some right wing stuff. So hopefully we won't talk about any of that. But knowing me, we might. That's the 30th with Jay. And then Arlen Schumer. That's a guy on the Twilight Zone and all kinds of stuff. Gary Clevenger. That's another guy on Rod Serling and other stuff that he's a lot of projects and voice work and stuff like that. And then when you come back on the 20th, Jeffrey Shanks, that's a weird archaeology. He's an archaeologist for the government, and he's a friend of mine here in Florida. And then the 27th is Dennis Stone. That's American Stonehenge. And then October 4th, Stephen Ward. And then we need some more chick guests, if you can think any. For some reason, the chick guest, I need the Stephanie Quick hook up with that. But their next chick guest is November 8th with you, Ellen Irvit Hopman, which is Celtic stuff and druidry and stuff like that. But the 11th is Dr. Charles Liu. That's quantum physics. He's like a scientist with quantum physics. He put out a book, the Quantum Physics Answer Book or something like that. October 18th, Paul Will. This is a good one. If you ever want to sit in for these Halloween shows, let me know. I know you usually like that off probably that month. But Paul Wild is, we're doing a whole Jim Morrison occult teacher show. He wrote a book about Jim Morrison being an occult teacher. So that's pretty cool. A Doors show. So that's always nice. That's never happened. So I'm looking forward to that. And then October 25th is the big Halloween show. That's Dara Mason, Darragh, and he's in the UK. And what is that book? Let me read the title of it. Just sounds like a crazy Halloween show. That's crazy. The book's called Song of the Dark Man, Father of Witches, Lord of the Crossroads. So that's the Halloween show. Song of the Dark Man, Father of Witches, Lord of the Crossroads. So that should be a good one for Halloween. Song of the Dark Man. That just sounds good for Halloween.
Yeah.
And then I want to get Stephanie on. She just hasn't been feeling well. I'll ask her about some guests. But then Ellen Everett Hopman, that's in November. She's been on before about a Halloween herb book and stuff like that. And she has a cool Druid book that just is coming out from Inner Traditions. But scheduling's been so weird. Mark Eddy's been doing most of my scheduling, and because it's just been weird. Like, it's just weird. Like, we've had so many people cancel. And it's not anything we're doing. It's just life is crazy. It's family emergencies or sickness or
somebody died.
or somebody croaking.
Yeah, that's pretty weird.
Jim Willis was the near-death experience author that died on a Friday before the show, before he came on. And Roger Janecki of Visible Press. Apparently, there's another book that he did about lost treasures, and his daughter Jan Willis may come on at some point to talk about her dad.
Okay, that's cool.
His book. So I'm waiting to hear about that, but I need to check back in with him with it before I use up my dates. But that's one I would like to have. Yeah, that was weird. It's like you try not to let that affect you, but it was just weird.
That's pretty weird. I mean, I'm sure that it's happened before, I mean, it's just that it can't happen. It can't happen very often,
I'm just glad it wasn't during the show.
Yeah, really. Like, boy.
That would suck. Gosh. I always think of that crazy song. Like, that song is so creepy, but it's a good band. It's called Filter. And it's called Hey Man, Nice Shot. I don't know if you've ever heard it. Hey Man, Nice Shot. And basically, it's from a guy that was in Nine Inch Nails, but I guess they broke up or something. He made his own gig. He's on my Facebook, and he hates Trump, which is always nice. Robert Patrick. But that song is about a newsman anchor that shot himself really.
Oh, yeah. That's a true story. That's like, it was like live.
It's
Yeah.
creepy, really creepy. But the whole song, I guess he's saying, "Hey man, nice shot," which I'm not sure what that is. Pro, this dude killing himself, making a statement. I guess I don't know.
Or maybe something ironic, an ironic thing to say.
Yeah, I think he was like exposing something too, like something big or something's why he did it. It was some weird story to it or something. I always hear about that one. I don't want to get into suicides right now. It's the last thing I want to get into, but one I think about too a lot is like that Family Feud host that hung himself on it. On
Oh,
the
yeah.
That's a creepy one. And then the craziest one's David Carradine jerking it, and then
Well, yeah. Well, the most tragic one, of course, is Robin Williams.
oh yeah, that one. Oh, I try not to. I think I've blocked that out psychologically. Like for
Yeah, oh, yeah. That's just,
that's a rough one. But yeah, let's move on. I already got enough weird depression in the air.
I mean, it's like, there's still times. I mean, it's been years, and there are still times when, like, I'll suddenly think about that and just start crying. It's just too intense.
I have a weird one that is weird that happened. I was on psychedelics, and it's just weird. And I feel weird even telling the story because I don't even know what to think about it. But for some reason, I saw that weird Applewhite guy on the news talking in my mom's house, and I started having tears run down my face for no reason. And I never even knew who it was. And I heard it on the news that they all whacked themselves. And I went outside and I like looked at Hellbop, and I saw a bunch of light dots like moving towards it. And I was like, is that them? And I was tripping. So of course I don't really think Heaven's Gate's cool or, pro what they did or anything, but I've read books about them. Like they seem kind of like nice, maybe a little crazy, but not even crazier than anybody else. But I may have had a weird experience. I was like, did they really do that? Or were they just crazy? But or was I hallucinating it like a psyop or something after I saw it in the drugs, like some weird thing? That was a weird one. I try not to tell. But who knows? They might actually float it out to the thing out there. That was a weird story with Hell Bob, though. I remember that comment. That was a weird comment.
Well, yeah, it was just a weird time. I mean, I think that the comment was made weird by the fact that that mass suicide happened. It was very in response to it. I mean, that kind of thing just seems very foreign to most people. I mean, I remember I was like my first, I think it was my first year into my master's degree at KU. And I had started studying. I mean, one of the things I was studying were UFO cults and religion. So of course, this was one. And I remember somebody from the school paper came up, and asked me, like was interviewing me and asked me like what I thought of it. And I said, well, I just hope that they found what they were looking for. I think that they were expecting me to say, oh, it's so terrible that they did that. And it's like, I have no idea if it's terrible or not. It's weird to me, but who knows?
Yeah. I honestly, I don't know in the long run, but I think there was some kind of weird truth to it on some level. I'm not going to go balls to the wall or anything, but there was something about it that was weird. That was different.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's weird.
And they said a lot of stuff like this was the Luciferian age and something that seemed like they were kind of anti-sex, which I'm not for that, of course, but something about that's how the devil uses like sex to keep you away from whatever enlightenment or whatever, some kind of crap like that in their teachings. I remember some stuff like that. There's a good documentary series on HBO about it. I forget what it's called, but I saw that. It was pretty. There's definitely some abusive stuff going on, which I didn't know about, but like just members who had kids that kind of like I guess disowned their kids and weird stuff and left them and just didn't communicate with them anymore and stuff and got kind of weird to where they just didn't even talk to their own kids and stuff like that, like weird stuff like that, weird cult stuff like Scientology. It does that. Weird stuff like that.
Yeah, well, and some of them like voluntarily like castrated themselves.
Yeah, Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean it's intense. I mean it's a tribute to just how much they believed what they believed.
Definitely kooky.
Yep.
There's a good series on HBO I saw called Ren Fair, like Renaissance Festival, just Ren Fair. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned it, but it's a documentary series about this guy named Commander George. That's like a dictator in Texas that runs this thing, and all the people he even claims he's going to die on a certain day. And he reminded me of like Saddam or the North Korean dude, but a white old dude. And all these people that work with him are wanting the fair. It's a big Renaissance fair in Texas, and it's huge. It makes a lot of money. So one's trying to buy it, the other one's trying to inherit. The whole documentary series shows all the Renaissance stuff and clips of that going on, while all this craziness is going on with this like dictator that owns it. But it was really crazy. It was just a weird mix up of a show, but it was a real documentary. It wasn't like fiction. It was real. It's a real thing, but it was good. It's like 3 episodes, like an hour a piece, but it was mostly fun because all the music in there. You get to see some of the Renaissance Festival stuff, which you don't normally get to really see that on TV or anything unless you just go to it. And I've been to one before, but here lately I haven't seen any around. I'd go to one now, but it seems like there's not any close by lately. Those are always fun. Have you ever go to the Renaissance Festival?
I used to be in the Renaissance Festival.
Nice. What'd you
I mean,
do?
I was on the circuit for a while in the Midwest. Well, I did a few things for the first few years that I was doing it. I did it for over 20 years, in addition to other stuff, because you can't really make a living unless you want to live a certain way, doing that. But for the first, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years, I was a solo musician. I sang and played guitar and mandolin. And a lot of people don't know I can sing, but I can. And so I did that for a while. And then, but it was also really, it's really strenuous to do that because, you end up, even though your sets are maybe like only 30 minutes long, you do like about 7 or 8 of them a day. So you're actually singing for 3 or 4 hours a day, which is a lot for anybody. And you're singing in all kinds of weather, in all kinds of contexts. They'll put you they'll put you in the same basic area of the park as they put like a bagpipe, and you're supposed to sing with this bagpipe in the background. So it started to kind of get on my health a lot, and so then I joined a small trio, kind of an ensemble. And because there were a couple of other women that I knew that played in the traditional music community in Kansas City, and they kind of wanted to do the Renfest too. And so one woman played the flute and recorders, things like that. And then I played what I play, and then the other friend played different harps. And then we'd sometimes all sing, kind of in harmony. And so we did that for a while. And then I just finally got tired of doing that because it's just hard. You've got to constantly sort of, rehearse and, it's a pain in the ass. And so but I also had other friends that had booths out there. And so I had one friend that had in fact, her partner, she has passed, but her partner still has the booth, to my knowledge, out in the Kansas City Renfest. And they did jewelry. It was like a 2-part booth, and they did jewelry in one part of it, and then in the other part of it, it was like a psychic booth. So they did tarot readings and rune readings and stuff. And so the final 10 years that I was in it, in doing the Renfest circuit, I did readings. I did tarot readings and rune readings.
Ooh, that's neat.
So yeah. And I quit doing it I started like in 1978 or 1979. And then I know that dates me a lot. And then I stopped probably, it was probably like in the early 90s when it was the early 90s. I took a break and then I went back for another 3 or 4 years in the late 90s, because I was going to graduate school at the time. So, but there was a period in there in between my teaching gigs where I needed some money. And it's true that on a good weekend, in the psychic booth, I could make $700 a day.
Oh.
In cash. So, yeah, I mean, and that was like in addition to whatever else I was making. So I wasn't just living on that, but that was like extra, you know what I mean? And that was, that's needed. It was part of how I made my living at the time.
I was wondering if they paid you there or how that worked.
Well, you get paid. It's not that I did get paid by the people in the booth, In fact, I paid them a small rental fee, out of what I earned. But now when I was a musician, I would get a stipend, a very small one, but I would get a stipend for that. And then I could also put out the hat and, whatever people wanted to give me for that. But when I was working as a psychic, tarot reader or whatever, I don't really call myself a psychic. We had some set prices, like we would all, since we weren't supposed to like undercut each other, you know what I mean? Yeah. So we would agree on like the kinds of services that we would offer and what the prices were. And so then it would just depend on how busy you were. And, on a day when we were really busy, you could make a lot of money.
Nice. Very cool. Was there ever puppet shows there? I've been wanting to do a puppet show on like YouTube. Little puppets. I've been looking at little alien puppets on eBay. They have little alien puppets.
Little alien. Oh, really? I have no idea.
Yeah, just weird things. Like sometimes I'll look on eBay and put an alien hand puppet or like ventriloquist dummies. You'd be surprised with some really weird stuff that comes up. You can look through some of those ventriloquist dolls and stuff like that are weird. But I've always liked the medieval puppet shows, which I don't think they really do that at Renaissance festivals. Maybe they used to, but I haven't ever seen it there. But mostly just see that on TV or something when they do like the little, the puppets and everything, the little stories and things like that, in the little curtain box and all that stuff. And I'm watching that show Time Bandits. There's a new Time Bandits show based on the Terry Gilliam movie. Unfortunately, it's on Apple, which sucks, but I still managed to see it somehow. But but it's good though. It's good. It's got that girl, that lady, Lisa Kudrow in it. She's in.
Oh yeah. I've heard about that. Yeah, I have. I've heard about that.
She's one of the Time Bandits. And there's a lot of cool people. It's by the guy that did What We Do in the Shadows and a bunch of the Takahiti Wakiti, New Zealand guy. But it is on Apple. But have you been watching anything interesting? You're still Amishing out.
Oh, yeah, I'm not Amishing out. I've never Amished out entirely. I've been going through, I know this is incredibly nerdy, but I've been going through, I guess it was last Christmas, I purchased for myself, I mean, some people will know that this exists. There's like this collector's edition of everything, of all the Star Trek stuff that is New Generation / Picard. And it's like a boxed set that has like all of it's Blu-ray, and it has all of the, all of the New Generation in it, as well as all the movies. as well as all of, seasons 1, 2, and 3 of Picard, like everything together, plus, I don't know, 60 hours of documentaries and crap like that. So, the truth is that I have never seen all of the episodes of Star Trek New Generation. So, I just, I got it for myself as a present last year, and I just kind of set it aside for a while. And so one of the things I've been doing this summer is just going through all of the episodes, and methodically sort of watching them. Sometimes I do other things like cook dinner or something while they're on, or like, especially for episodes that I've seen. And then I'm also watching, if you remember that Star Trek, science fiction series Farscape.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, well, I had never seen all of it either, but you can get it, the whole thing, on Amazon. On Prime.
Yeah.
So I've been making my way through that, and what I do there is when I'm at work, when I take lunch, if I'm not doing something else, I'll just sit there and watch an episode while I eat. That's what I've been doing. And I've also been going back through the Blu-ray edition of the remake of Battlestar Galactica came out. And it's got everything in it. Like, it's got all of the webisodes, all of the extra little things they did. You know what I mean? And it's got all of that in it. It's a much more complete set. And I haven't started that yet, but that's like one of my favorite series, is that remake of Battlestar Galactica. I think that's really a good series.
I never seen it, but I have it like on a hard drive or something, but I never saw it.
It's good. It's really worth seeing. I mean, even if you didn't see the first version of Battlestar Galactica, Ronald Moore, who became one of the more important writers for Star Trek, not Star Trek. He started in the Star Trek New Generations, but became one of the principal writers for Star Trek DS9 and a lot of the Voyager episodes. Yes. He actually created and produced this remake with another guy whose name I can't remember now. And so the writing is really good. And, the subject matter and just the way it was done, it's just a really, it's probably one of the best science fiction series that's ever been done. It's just really good.
I've seen some of the old ones, but I don't remember them. It's been a long time. When I was a kid, I watched it, but
right.
I didn't see all of them.
Right. No, this is actually, I think it's a lot better. I mean, they have links with the old one, like the guy who played Starbuck in the original one. He is in the remake, but he doesn't play Starbuck. He's a different character entirely, one that they created for this remake. And he actually ends up playing a relatively important role in the later part of the show. It's, it's interesting what they did with it. But yeah. But anyway, and I've been reading a lot. I've been reading just a lot and reading a lot of different things. Like, I'm reading a book that's called it's called the women who, what is it? The Women Who Married the Bear or something like that. But it's a book that half the book is done by Barbara Alice Mann, who is a Seneca historian and lore keeper that I've talked about on the show before. So half the book is done by her, but the other half is done by a woman whose name I cannot pronounce because she is a Finnish scholar.
Yeah.
And but what they are doing is in the book they are comparing stories from indigenous North America and Northern Europe about women and bears, and these stories are. A lot of these stories are older than agriculture. They sort of predate the development of agriculture.
Yeah.
And they're linking the development of those stories and the change in those stories. In a lot of those early stories, bear was feared, but was not an enemy of people. You know, and bear was connected to the goddess and stuff. And then at some point, those stories start to change, and bear starts to be hunted, and then bear also hunts people, and bear starts to need to be controlled, and it's connected to the end of certain climactic changes, and also development of certain types of agriculture and more settled village life and stuff like this. So anyway, what's interesting is that they're comparing indigenous North American beliefs with indigenous European beliefs from Northern Europe and Eurasia, to show how they're similar and different. But the similarities are kind of startling. And it's because there are some people that argue that during certain ice ages, because of the nature of the ice and the way that it sort of froze everything up north, and allowed people to sort of move around and animals to move around, that there developed a kind of interesting circumpolar cultural complex between Eurasia and North America. And that's where you get some of the similar ideas, that crop up. But anyway, it's an interesting book. Some people would find it controversial. And I'm reading another book about Neanderthals, some of the latest stuff that they've been finding about them. And I've read some Star Trek novels, some of the newer novels. I haven't been reading a lot of paranormal stuff lately. I go through these periods where I have to sort of get away from paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
Although I have been listening to some podcasts. I listen to them at work. I think I've mentioned I listened a lot to one of the podcasts I listen to is called Beyond Creepy. If you haven't ever listened to Beyond Creepy before, that podcast is really interesting. The guy who does it, he finds these really fascinating cases that I've never even heard of. And he likes to do cases from other parts of the world. He finds people that'll help him like translate texts from Eastern Europe or from South America, and or from just other kind of odd places. And then he'll just tell some of the stories, some of the accounts, and he likes to pick really odd ones, really strange ones. And he just has this really interesting way of narrating it. It's a very kind of, he's just a regular guy voice, you know what I mean? And he just does a really good job of picking stuff. So I always recommend him. If you just want to hear like a really good creepy story, listen to Beyond Creepy.
I believe I've saved that before on my YouTube after you mentioned it. I think let me double check, make sure. So I need to check it out at some point.
So, I have been listening to podcasts, and so, and I did that. Let's see, in July, I did that. I did a Patreon feature for Smiles Lewis.
Yes.
And for his Anomaly Archives Patreon channel. And what did I do it on? Oh, I know what I did it on. He wanted me to do kind of an examination of why it's important when you're doing paranormal research, why it's important to take a kind of a multi-level approach. In other words, don't get too bogged down in any one theory or idea about what stuff is. And so what I decided I would do is just create a presentation as if I was talking to someone who had come up to me and said, I'm going to start being a paranormal researcher. What would you suggest? you know, for newbies, basically. And so I used a lot of examples from Paul Eno. I used four people as my examples for my organizing principles: Paul Eno, Eugenia Macer Story, Jacques Vallée, and John Keel, of course. And just kind of distilled everything that these people have done into like several principles, and just talked about those things. And this has not been released to the public. It's on Patreon. Although at some point, I guess I actually do have the link for some people who might request it privately. I just have been asked not to make it public because they're trying to build up their subscriber base. You know what I mean? So, but if you would want it, I could send it to you so you could listen.
Yeah, you can send it. Did his son come on with him before on our show? I can't remember. I think so.
Who smiles?
No, Paul's son. I think Paul and his son.
Paul and Ben. Paul and
Yeah.
Benny. Well, Paul was on our show once or twice. Just Paul himself. I mean, and usually he came on with Ben.
Yeah, I think he ever came on before with his son once, but I can't remember. I know Paul's been on, but I can't remember about his son.
Yeah, I mean, they came on after it was in order to do the as part of the promo of their book, Everything You Thought You Knew About the Paranormal Is Wrong. That's the name of the book.
Okay, yeah. Been a little while, but my memory lately is like insane crappy.
Yeah.
Barely remember yesterday.
And then another book I've been reading is this one. I can show it to you. It's one of the latest books by Chris Aubeck, who's a guy who has
sounds familiar.
Well, he's worked with Jacques Vallée, and it's called Letters of the Damned. It's these are a collection of, I don't know where he got these or how he researched them, but it's a collection of letters that Charles Fort wrote to editors of newspapers and journals in order to get people to send him his weird stuff, and also to comment about stuff that the newspapers were saying. But what he does is he provides really interesting kind of contexts for the letters. So, whenever because one of the things that Fort apparently did when he wrote these letters is he would cite these different sources, these different places where he was getting previous accounts. And you're able to he was actually really good about citing his sources. So you're actually a historian is actually able to go to these letters, get his sources that he cites, and then go look those sources up and find out what he was actually reading, like what he was actually kind of looking at. And then try to figure out, can these things be explainable now, or are they just plain weird still, So anyway, it's an interesting book.
That book, I have the other book, he did Wonders in the Sky. I forget the
Yes. Yeah.
Check that one out.
Yeah, and then I'm still reading through this book here that he did, Tracing the Origins of Disc-Shaped UFOs, Saucers, and what it does is it goes through an exhaustive survey of how far back into history, saucer-like things in the sky have been seen. And I like I said, I don't know. I mean, he lives in Europe and he speaks multiple languages. Like both of these books have been translated into French were published in English, French, and Portuguese. So like he speaks multiple languages. But he must spend days and months in archives looking up his stuff, for both these books. I'm glad somebody does it. because I'm too old to do that. I don't want to go to Europe to do that.
Yeah, I have to check out that Fort book. That sounds good. They both sound good.
Yeah, I mean they are. They're very good. Um, Whoops. And then connected to that are, oops, I've got a pile of books that decided that they're going to try to fall over. Hold on just a second. I was just reaching over for something. Stop it. Come on, dude. Sit up. There we go. These books right here, they're also connected to Charles Fort. And these guys are colleagues of Chris Aubeck. It's called 2 volumes of something that's called Redemption of the Damned. And what these guys have done is they've gone through Charles Fort's Book of the Damned, and they've picked out some of the more interesting, bizarre phenomena that he reported on. Like maybe he would come back to it over and over again. Stuff that Fort himself considered significant. And what they do is they take his accounts of whatever that was, like what the air. And this first volume is about aerial phenomena. Things that people see in the sky, or things that people saw through telescopes, like moving across the face of the sun, or the face of the moon. And what they do is they go back and they've done intense research into like what the original sources were that Fort was dealing with. But then they also look at what they what we now know about natural phenomena and about optics and all this kind of stuff. Can these things be explained now? Are there other possible ways in which we can see what happened? And sometimes you can explain it and sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just weird, whatever it is,
They look interesting, like good books for sure.
Yeah, they're kind of technical. So people who are like, really into, just reading weird stories, they're probably not going to like them. True believers are not going to like them necessarily. They're too scholarly. But I like, because I'm a historian and I like to know what things could have been. So.
Yeah, sound good. Some good ones for sure. And, we got about 4 minutes. I'm probably going to start the Neil Donald Walsh stuff right at the hour.
Cool.
And, but thanks for filling in. That was I didn't see that cancellation coming. I just didn't think it was going to happen, so it kind of caught me by surprise. Slap Jerry. Of course, Mark Eddy's not in here tonight. He's usually here every night, but he would at least ask some questions. But he's the publicist. But I understand being sick, but it just surprised me with 2 hours before the show, I guess. But we're going to, for the second hour, play the Neil Donald Walsh Conversations with God interview. And it was only an hour interview. And if you need some uplifting lift me ups or some books to check out Neil Donald Walsh Conversations with God. Definitely something good to read now as everything goes to crap. But I'm going to play that for the second hour. And we'll see you next week with, God, who did I even say? I can't even remember. Leo Zagami, or I think that's who it was. Let me look again. I always forget. Now I can't close everything to look. Let's see. Desktop. That's how bad my memory is. I'm pretty sure that's who it was, but where is the thing at? Oh, there it is. Let's see who next. Robert Sullivan's next Friday, then Leo Zagami. And Enoch next week, and Illuminati the next week.
Illuminati. Sorry.
Illuminati. All right. Thanks, everybody. You listen to United Public Radio, 107.7 FM New Orleans. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Wham. Everybody have a good weekend and get ready for your journey into the thralls of God. Don't Heaven's Gate.
No Heaven's Gate, no suicide, just God.
Yes. All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you later. Bye bye.
Okay. Take care. Let me see if I can get this going without any weirdness. I don't know if I need to shut off. Just give me a second. Mute. Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night. It's 7:05 p.m. Central. Got Wham here with us tonight up in Hudson Valley.
Hey.
And of course, I'm in Florida. And let me tell you, those storms that just came through here, if that was, we always talk about the Ragnarok Thimble winter situation, the Norse situation. That was close. That was like,
was it close?
It was freezing outside with tornado warnings at the same time. Like, I've never experienced that in the winter ever. So, I mean, we've been getting 30s and 40s here in Florida where I'm at. I'm up in the Panhandle near Panama City Beach. And it was crazy, but definitely, luckily, the power only went out once, not for very long, but a lot of people had it a lot worse than I did. And prayers to them. Some of them are still in shelters and stuff, but I went through Hurricane Michael and that really sucked. But it reminds you of that when this kind of stuff happens. This wasn't as bad as Hurricane Michael, but it was still bad. The weirdest part is just like winter. Like, I'm not used to it. It's like a winter craziness in Florida that I've never seen before. So, but other than that, I tried to enjoy it, but was always worried about the power and electricity going off and all that crap because of work and everything. So, but luckily we survived it, and we live on. Last week was Eric's Grimsrud. That was a Nostradamus Mabus show about the quatrains, where he has some pretty convincing things that somehow he thinks Trump means Mabus. He basically thinks Trump is the Antichrist, which I'm sure a lot of people may agree or disagree with that. But it was a good show. And this week, I'm very excited to have Neil Donald Walsh return. The book is Common Sentience, God Talk, Experiences of Humanity's Connections with a Higher Power. And I've been reading Conversations with God for a long time. And I've also said that on many levels, they kind of kept me out of trouble, and it was something to go to. And when my father passed away when I was younger at 17, it was 18 or 19. At 17, I went through testicular cancer and went through chemo and all that stuff. And then a year or two later, my dad died. And I went through a divorce and started to have a lot of weird synchronicities and spiritual experiences, what some would call paranormal experiences. And during that time, I in my 20s and above had read, Conversations with God. And I grew up Christian. My father was a preacher, went to Rabun Gap in North Georgia, some kind of crazy military weird thing where they somehow were messing with like venom for snakes to be immune. Craziness in Georgia religious wise. So this was, a version of God that I felt comfortable with. That when I read those books, I still read them. I have the meditation books. I have the new book. I'm always trying to read them and take it in on some level. I even had my mom YouTube and Neil the last few days. She's 70 and she was watching all your videos and loving it. But anytime I read it, I get goosebumps. And that usually tells me that something's, true, something's right with that. And some of those experiences that I had after my dad died, I saw beings of light, and I may have been him. One of my biggest experiences that I had was here in Florida. Something told me to go outside and look towards my house. I came outside, turned towards my house, and saw two beings of light as if they'd been in my house and went straight up into the heavens. And I don't know if they were angels, people, maybe it was my dad, I thought, but I've been having these experiences, and here we are at year 17 with Neil Donald Walsh, and we've had, nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman on about UFOs, Robert Salas, Air Force pilot Robert Salas, who reported UFOs coming to his silos at the base he was at. He's still enlisted and put out a whole book about this, Captain Robert Salas, about UFOs shutting down nuclear silos, and he's still enlisted, so obviously probably got permission to do this book. But basically, all these experiences with my dad dying and that trauma, and I think trauma brings on experiences, and it grew to doing the show, and here we are. And that's why I like God Talk so much, because right now things feel really crazy in the world. Like, I don't know if they're shooting us foreign nations with lasers to manipulate our emotions, but things just feel crazy, like on so many different levels of discomfort. So it's good to, Neil, that you wrote this book. I know it's your 40th book, but I'm glad to do a positive show because these kind of stories help people. And lately, a lot of people need that help. So, what can you tell us about this book and your 40th being your 40th book?
Well, it's my attempt to help people to realize how they can have their own deep and personal and very real and intimate connection with the divine. You know, what's interesting, Jeffrey, is that recent surveys by sociologists have shown that more than half the people in the world, actually 85% of the respondents to a survey taken by sociologists, have said that they believe in a higher power. So there doesn't seem to be too much question as to whether or not, at least among most people, whether there's more going on here than meets the eye, whether there is a higher power, an entity or an essence, an essential essence that some people call God or Yahweh or Jehovah or Allah or whatever word it pleases them to use to refer to that ineffable essence. But while 85% of human beings questioned apparently believe in God, not very many people think that God talks to them directly, or at least know that they wouldn't say it that way. They wouldn't call it that. So, but my experience has been that God is talking to everyone all the time. That is, we are receiving information constantly from life, from God, from the divine essence, continually. But we're calling it something else. Most people wouldn't call it a conversation with God because, frankly, they don't want to be marginalized or ridiculed or made fun of. So nobody says, well, God told me this morning, this, or the other thing. So what they call it is, who knows, women's intuition or an epiphany or sudden insight, whatever word it pleases to use to get away from saying, I had a conversation with God. But we're all having the same experience all the time. And so this publisher called me. Normally, as an author and I've written a few books, Jeffrey, normally I write a book and then I try to find a publisher who will put it into print and distribute it, try to find a publisher. But in this case, the publisher called me and my phone rang one day about a year ago. And it was a publisher who said, would you write a book for us? First time I was ever offered an invitation by a publisher, sight unseen, out of the blue, to write a book. I said, what did you have in mind? And they said, we'd like you to write a book about how people could move closer to having the same experience that you claim to have had in your life. How could the average person have their own conversation with God? I said, you know what? I'll be glad to share with you the process that seemed to work for me. So I wrote the book and they titled it God Talk. And it's about how people can talk to God and how people can hear God talking back to them. So that's what the book is about. Thanks for asking the question.
And I've noticed, like on Facebook, like sometimes me or Christina, our friend, will share something about God, and then definitely if it has like something Christian on it, people will start going nuts under it. Like just be, kind of rude. And I mean, I understand being angry at that religion on some level. I get it, because I mean, we have my mom and sisters went through some abuse from a family member that was a preacher. So I understand, you people being upset about religion. And then when I shared your stuff, just positive. So that was a good thing to see, that, when's it start, and everybody's, there was no adverse reaction. And I know one of the first things that God said to you was, you got me all wrong. And you've said that to, to everybody on some level, how religion is kind of like, know, you know, in Christianity, when someone kills someone, God told them to do it. And then it's like on your level, God's kind of like, maybe I didn't do that, or I didn't do that, not maybe. And it's just interesting how man gets into they kind of abuse it on some level and use it for their own. Like we just saw that Napoleon Ridley Scott movie. It's good for a watch. I wouldn't watch it again anytime, but some of these personalities get out there, in the name of God, and, just conquer and kill, like it's going on right now with Ukraine and all that situation. Uh, but if you could, what could you tell us a little bit about, like, how people view God in a negative light, and what has God said about that on some level when it comes to You Got Me Wrong?
I think it's important to indicate that I'm not a religion basher. That is, it's not my position that the world's religions, and there we're told, 4,223 religions now being practiced, not from the beginning of time, but being practiced in this very moment on the planet Earth, over 4,200 religions. So I'm not a religion basher. I'm not here saying that religions have everything wrong. The fact of the matter is, most of the world's religions hold a great deal of wisdom, wonderful insights, lots of clarity, or they wouldn't have lasted as long as they've lasted. So, but the challenge of religions, as I see it, is that number one, they do contain some mistakes in doctrine and dogma. Number two, they appear to me to be incomplete. That is, they don't have the whole story, leading me to ask the question, is it possible, just possible, that there's something we don't fully understand here about God, about life, and about ourselves, the understanding of which would change everything? So that's the question I started off in dealing with God. Let me explain, if I could, in just a second or two, how it came to pass that I had that experience. I was moving through a very difficult time in my life. You talked about the difficult challenges in your life at the age of 17, 19, and so forth. I had some difficult challenges as well, but they came in my life a little bit later. I'm not sure whether it's better earlier or better later, but in me, I led a pretty smooth life until I was around 45 or 48 years old. And then suddenly, Jeffrey, everything began falling apart. I lost my relationship with my wife. We parted amicably. It wasn't a bitter parting, but we agreed that it just wasn't working. We probably should live apart. Fair enough. But 5 days later, I lost my job. I was a radio talk show host on a national syndication, and the corporation was losing money, and they had to lose some overhead. And so I was the last person hired. So I had no seniority, last in, first out. And the boss even said, the program director said, I hate to lose you because you're one of our better guys, but seniority rules the roost, and so I got to let you go. I lost my relationship and lost my job, all within a 5-day period. But that wasn't enough, Jeffrey. The universe had a triple whammy in store for me. I'm driving to an appointment for a job interview. I'm sure I'm going to get this job because I've got all the qualifications. On the way to the job interview, an elderly gentleman turns left in front of me, makes a left turn, smacked right into my car, and it wasn't a fender bender. He totaled my car, and I wound up with a broken neck. I wind up being raced to the hospital. They get me over there, and I will never forget the wording of the hospital examination form. It said I had suffered an avulsion fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae posteriorly. Well, but a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture. Jeffrey, a 3/4 inch break in your neck. We're not talking about a hairline fracture. We're talking about a break in your neck large enough to put a pencil through. And when I woke up from the anesthesia, the doctor leaned over the table and they put, they put stuff in to close up the gap in my neck. But the guy said to me, you know what? I've been doing this kind of work for a long time. 95% of the people who come in here with a break that severe in their neck die, if they don't die instantly, because of spinal cord complications. But you managed to survive. Not only did you survive, Mr. Walsh, the others, the 5% who don't survive such a severe accident are certainly usually paralyzed from the neck down. You suffered neither consequence. He leans over the table, Jeffrey, and he says to me, looking into my eyes, so what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Because you've been given an incredible once-in-a-lifetime gift. So I'm thinking, my golly, oh my gosh. So I go back to my little, I had managed to find a little, one-room apartment on top of somebody's garage, just to get out of the house, to give my soon-to-be former wife a spatial break. So I'm living in this little one-room apartment on top of a friend's garage. But I couldn't, I couldn't figure out what's going on. So, and I wound up, I couldn't give the guy the rent he was asking for. Finally, he said, hey, friend or not, I got to ask you to leave. But I'm used as a source of income for our whole family. We have to ask you to leave. Now, Jeffrey, I'm living on the street. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. I have no job. I have no income. I've used up my savings. And I'm living on the sidewalk. That went on for a year of my life. 1 year living on the sidewalk, sleeping on the concrete, going from person to person with my hand out, asking if they had any loose change or anything they could spare so that I could eat that day. So I know what it's like to be out there going from person to person, begging for enough money to buy some food and trying to, you never know what it's like to losing your dignity, your human dignity, until you've got to go into a restaurant and beg them to use the restroom because they see you coming in. You're obviously a street person. You don't look good. You don't smell good, obviously. And the manager comes right over to you. Please, not here, not here. Please leave. Don't panhandle. I said, I didn't come here to panhandle. Honest, can I just use the restroom? You got to beg a manager of a restaurant for a place to use the toilet. That's when you know you've lost every shred of human dignity that you once had. And I went through that. Finally, I got a little bit back on my feet. And I'm now once again in a little apartment someplace. And I woke up at 4:30 in the morning. Sorry for such a long story, but I want people to understand where I'm coming from. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning and I'm furious with life. I'm furious with God because I always believed there was some kind of a higher power. I'm not sure I knew much more about it, doctrinally speaking, but I knew there was more going on here than meets the eye. So I'm sitting on this guy's secondhand sofa that he put in this little apartment, and I'm writing an angry letter on a yellow legal pad that I had on the coffee table. I'm writing an angry letter to God just to get it off my chest. What does it take to make life work? What have I done to deserve a life of such ongoing, endless struggle? Tell me the rules. I remember writing that sentence specifically. Mm-hmm. Tell me the rules. I will play this silly game. Just tell me the rules. And don't change the rules after you give them to me. And now I hear a voice and I turn around, there's nobody in the room. I think, great, now on top of everything else, I'm losing my mind. But the voice continued speaking to me in a kind, gentle way. Neil, do you really want answers to all of these questions, or are you just venting? I said, you think? But if you have answers, I'd sure as hell like to know what they are. And the voice said to me, you are sure as hell about a lot of things, but wouldn't you rather be sure as heaven? And I'm thinking, all right, what's that supposed to mean? And then I received answers to all the questions I had written on that yellow legal pad. What is the purpose and point of life? What are the rules? How does it all work? And I received other answers as well that I never imagined could possibly be true. And that is what launched what I came to understand was my own personal interaction with the divine, my own, if you please, conversations with God. But here is how it became a book, because I didn't sit down to write a book. It wasn't like I woke up one day and said, I think I'll write a book called Conversations with God. There's an idea. Why didn't I think of that? No, I never had that. I was having a personal spiritual experience. But in that experience, I was told, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. And I thought to myself, that's not going to happen. Nobody's going to write a book. I mean, nobody's going to publish it. And what publisher is going to say, hey, we got a guy here who's talking to God. We got to get this book out right away. Hold the presses. No, it's not going to happen. But in fact, a small publisher on the East Coast, I sent it to 4 or 5 publishers just to see what would happen. I literally sent them my handwritten notes. I Xeroxed the notes and sent them off to some publishers. And one publisher called me and said, hey, we want to put this out. This is fascinating stuff. And I thought, you know what? I can't believe it. You're actually going to publish this book. A small publisher on the East Coast. But they put the book out. And I thought, okay, it's not going to sell 500 copies. And I was right. It didn't sell 500 copies. It sold 5 million in 37 languages. Not bragging, just saying. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And of course, I've seen the movie. And when it comes to the process of writing your book, was it like a channeling or automatic writing, like a super consciousness, like coming through? I mean, could you tell us a little bit like about that?
Yeah, it wasn't like channeling, Jeffrey. Channeling, the way people usually think of channeling is when your body is taken over by some other entity. I didn't experience that at all. And it wasn't automatic writing either. I mean, it wasn't like something exterior to myself was controlling my hand and causing me to write certain things. It was simply a process of receiving thoughts in my mind. Honestly, it felt like taking dictation. I would ask a question and I began, of course, when I realized I had this incredible connection, I started asking it questions about everything: parenting, diet, sexuality, human relationships, finding right livelihood, a career that makes sense to my soul. I asked questions about everything. And I would receive answers instantly. So I simply wrote down what I was hearing. It felt like I was simply taking dictation. That's how it felt. That was the experience. And finally, when I sent it off to a publisher, they decided to actually put it out. It shocked me. I couldn't believe it. But they did. And it wound up becoming, again, not bragging, just saying, a global bestseller in 37 languages.
And when it comes to like the horrors in the world, a lot of I know humans like to blame God easily. We find ourselves doing it kind of like in a weird automatic kind of way. And I mean, there's part of me, I mean, I like comic books. I'm like, I want God to just Superman up and go kick Putin's butt or whatever. I guess what are some of the messages about that? Like the people that just see, I mean, there's just so much, you can't blame God for it, but it's just trying to understand it and also not lose your connection with God or not blame God for it. Like recently, I've had a boss do crazy stuff with financial stuff, and he's very Christian, and and not. I was raised Christian. I still believe in Christ, and I've had those light being experiences, and I've said, they obviously probably have a supervisor. Maybe it's Jesus Christ. They're glowing, and it's interesting too. This company puts out a book on light beings. That was kind of cool to see. So I didn't feel as crazy. They also this publisher has a whole book on that. So that was kind of cool to see. But when it comes to the horrors and still keeping that God connection and not blaming God for all the crap in the world, what could you give us advice on that?
Well, I asked God, if you really are God, if you really are, the highest entity in the universe, the higher powers, so to speak, why don't you just stop what's going on Earth? Why don't you just change things? What are you doing? You're just sitting around watching the world fall apart. Do something for God's sake. You should excuse the pun. And God made it very clear to me. God said, Neil, it's not my intention to turn you into minions, to turn the entire human species into just a race of minions who just do what I say, follow the orders, and then I'll be good to you. My love for you is not transactional. You give me what I want, what I demand, what I command, and then I'll give you, what I can do to make life work better on Earth. That wasn't my intention. My intention was to create a species, not just your species, incidentally, but sentient beings throughout the cosmos. My intention was to create sentience throughout the cosmos and provide them with the power to create their own reality. Therefore, the reason that I don't come in and intervene and stop the world from destroying itself is that I've given you free will, the greatest gift you could give to any sentient being anywhere. That is the ability and the will to determine how it is you want to experience your life. And that's why life is the way you're experiencing it, because that's what you've decided to do. You don't seem to be able to get away from making decisions that are clearly and obviously self-destructive. And I asked God, okay, why? Why? I mean, why don't we wake up? Why would we make such crazy decisions as a group? We've had armed conflict, just to use one example, Jeffrey. We've had armed conflict on this planet for all but 3% of recorded history. So I said to God, what's up around that? I get that you don't want to give us orders and have us be a civilization of minions. Fair enough. But why don't we, what would it take for us to wake up, to evolve and stop, doing what we're doing to ourselves? And God said, the challenge, Neil, is that most human beings don't know who they really are. You have no idea who you are, where you are, why you are where you are, and what to do about that. You think that you're your body. You think that you are your mind. You really think that the human being you're seeing in the mirror is who you are. But those few among you, that is relatively speaking on a percentage basis, not numerically few, it's millions, but compared to the 8 billion people on the earth, those of you who know who you are, that you are actually a spiritual entity, that you are a spiritual being using your body and using your mind as tools with which to complete the agenda of your soul. Those of you who know who you are have found the key to creating the experience that you wish to create. Therefore, the process of your continuing evolution as a civilization is to spread the word about that, to share it with as many people as possible. Why do you suppose I've given you this book? And that's what she said to me. And she was very clear when he made his pronouncements in what I have come to call my conversations with God. So the challenge for us is to wake up and to become clear about why we're here and what our purpose being on earth is, and whether we're serving our purpose by doing the kinds of things that are happening in Ukraine and elsewhere around the planet, and not just the wars and conflicts, bad enough, but the economic disasters we've created and the emotional disasters we've created, the racial implications, the racial strife we've seen on this planet for hundreds and hundreds of years. We just can't seem to get anything right. None of our systems, Jeffrey, are working. Our political systems are not working to do what they were apparently designed to do, help us to get along and cooperate with each other. Our economic systems are not working to provide equal opportunity for as many people as possible. Our social systems are not working to find a way to help us to agree with each other and to disagree agreeably. And our spiritual systems, of course, have not worked from the very beginning to help us get closer to God and to love each other more and more. They've done exactly the opposite. So we have systems on the planet that need to be revamped completely with a brand new idea about who we are, who God is, and what is the actual function and purpose of human life.
Definitely. And when I've seen these light beings, I've wondered if there are souls, like if it's we're like have these kind of like light bodies. And I know they talk about that in shamanism a lot. And I've noticed, weird. I've had some weird spiritual experiences with the sun. That kind of seems like a divine manifestation of God on some level. I'm not going to say it's completely the sun is God, because with science and gases and all that stuff, but it's definitely something weird that I think our souls are connected to, and these light beings and things like that. And what
Well,
I've wondered too, yeah, with the experiences you've had, has anything visually ever came up, like paranormal or spiritual, that you've seen, or is it always within?
I can't say that I have seen anything that we would describe as paranormal, but it has all been within. But I have had internal experiences that one would definitely describe as paranormal. But with regard to the question of whether the sun is God or anything in particular is God, I was told that God is everything. That is, there is nothing that is not God. When people have said to me in a number of interviews through the years and in public meetings and lectures, somebody inevitably gets up at the back of the room and says, okay, Mr. Walsh, what's your definition of God? What is God after all? And I say to them, the very effort to try to define God limits the unlimited. There is nothing that is not God. Everything is the essential essence, the pure energy, if you please, of life itself that I call God, manifesting in a particular form. The question is, do we as sentient beings have the ability to impact, to affect the form in which the our energies are being manifest? And the answer is yes. Yes, we do have that ability. We're simply not using it to the degree that we might. But those who have used that ability to impact the form in which life's energy is manifesting have been called saints or sages or gurus or masters, because they have, in fact, mastered the ability to formulate energy in the way that they choose to see it made manifest in their reality.
And when it comes to God talk, is there a particular story or a few that you'd like to share, that in different ways that God comes through in those stories?
Well, it's interesting. The publisher who called me, as I mentioned a while ago, said we'd like to include some stories from other people because we don't want anyone to think, oh, Neil Donald Walsh is the guy to whom God talks. The fact is, God talks to everyone all the time, according to you, and we agree with you. So we put out a call on the internet, and we literally invited people on the internet. If you have ever had an experience of what you would call divine intervention, please send us your story. And they said to me they received hundreds of stories from people all over the world, and they picked out 6 or 7 of the most interesting stories and put them into the book. I don't want to necessarily give away what the plot line of those stories, but they are 7 fascinating stories of other people, proving the point that divine intervention is occurring in everyone's life all the time. And so, Jeffrey, when you tell me some of the experiences that you've had in your life, turning around and looking at the house and seeing those light beings and other experiences, I'm not surprised at all, because all of us are experiencing moments of divine intervention. But most people, as I said earlier, are simply calling it something else. You know, an amazing coincidence or an extraordinary, event, a phenomenon of some kind. But in fact, it is, in my view, divine intervention. Life informing life about life through the process of life itself.
Anything you'd like to add, Wham, or do you want me to keep on?
Keep on.
Okay, keep on.
I was just hoping that Wham, you'd just be a little bit more quiet, because if you've been bugging the heck out of me by yakking, you just can't keep quiet. So please, if you just go to the background, Wham, and stop taking so much of the program, then we could have Jeffrey would have a chance to say a little more of what he wants to say.
Yeah, she jumps in anytime. She's more support for the second hour. That's and I told her to get some topics ready for that for sure. But and as far as oh yeah, another book that the company puts out, shamanism. That's really cool. A lot of cool titles. I love that subject as well. That's one that's helped me a lot, through the years too. Just that ancient kind of knowledge. So when it comes to what kind of things are going through your mind lately with God and your communications and connection, just with the way things are right now with everything in the world? Is there something in particular that's been on your mind more?
Yes. What can I do? What can we all do actually? Is there anything that we can do, or is it a lost cause? I mean, life on Earth, as we both looked at it here, and you've described some of what you've been seeing yourself. Is there any point to even trying? Is there anything that an average person in life can do to impact the direction in which humanity seems to be moving? Is our movement towards self-destruction irrevocable, or can we somehow do something about it? So that's where my mind has been. And I've been asking God that question. And God said to me, I gave you all the answers. And in book 4, Conversations with God, book 4, I was told directly that this point in time, these days and times, offer us the best opportunity we've ever had as a civilization to evolve, because we are seeing the opposite of who we choose to be rising up before us so dramatically, so powerfully, that we can't ignore it anymore. We just can't look the other way and pretend that it's not true. But unless, of course, it's about climate change, then we can pretend that it's not true. We can look right in the face of climate change and say, it's not true, it's not true. They're making it all up. The liberals are making all the whole story up about climate change. The climate is not changing. It's not. So, but if it's about the political situation in the world, or other aspects, the economic collapse of half the countries of the world, and all the other problems we see humanity facing, uh, are there things that we can do? And it turns out that there are. And what we have to do is create critical mass. That is, put a new idea in the space about life, about God, about ourselves, and about who we are in relationship to each other. And having put that new idea in the space, then to move through life as a demonstration of what it is that we say we've come to understand clearly. So that's our chance, our challenge, and that's our opportunity. And that's why I do programs like this. And by the way, without, not just throwing roses at you, but I just want you to know, Jeffrey, that I see you doing that. I see you, in fact, putting ideas into space that challenge orthodoxy, that make us stop and think, what if he's right? What if even part of this is true? Is there more here to know? Is there something, in fact, that we do not fully understand about God, about life, and about ourselves, the understanding of which would change everything? So thank you, Jeffrey, for what you do, and for having the courage to step out and to say, look, here are some new ideas, here are some new thoughts, take them or leave them, but I'm not going to be quiet about it. And then for moving through your life as a demonstration of what it is you've come to understand. Nice going, Jeffrey.
Thank you. And well, that's what the big part of the reason we're all here is I saw a bunch of weird stuff that I don't understand. And I've been trying to, and part of that was weird UFO stuff and some weird beings that I still don't know what the heck they were. They're weird. But one thing that's been interesting is how much this UFO subject is taken off in the media. It's like the X-Files. Like I try not to even watch the news that much, but I'll walk by my mom's TV and it's like all they're talking about on NBC and all this stuff. Like it's crazy. They're releasing weird footage. There was some weird footage that it's on a show called Leak Project, and they got some weird look like he said jellyfish mech suit over Iraq, and it may have been something military, but it was this weird thing that almost looked like a mechanical jellyfish, looked like it was from a GI Joe cartoon, but it was real footage of this thing that was just the weirdest looking thing, and it was real footage over Iraq, and it was probably some weird military junk, I mean, or something like that. But do you have any thoughts when you see all this UFO stuff in the media now? I know you talk about other beings and stuff like that, but what kind of goes through your head with seeing all we're being bombarded by the UFO stuff now?
What goes through my head is what I was told in my conversations with God. There are what conversations with God defines as highly evolved beings. And the acronym HEBS, HEBS, is used throughout the latter portion of the dialogue in CWG. So HEBS, highly evolved beings, if you please, do exist. I mean, obviously, mathematically, it would be impossible for them not to exist. It's clear that there is intelligent life throughout the cosmos. Perhaps not here on Earth, but there is intelligent life throughout the cosmos. And to be serious for a moment, there's no question that there are civilizations, entities, if you will, that are in fact highly evolved. Now, I'm convinced that those highly evolved beings are in fact visiting Earth. Really, they're visiting the entire cosmos. They're exploring the entire universe, but those explorations include this planet. So have highly evolved beings, have visitors, if you please, aliens from other planets been visiting the Earth? Of course. And not just in the past 2 or 3 weeks, but from the beginning, from the outset. And their visits are increasing, however, as they see our civilization, at least this is my understanding, as they see our civilization moving closer and closer to our own ultimate self-destruction, or if not self-destruction, certainly bringing an end to our present way of life, where things would become so unpleasant with, again, the climate change, just as one example, the climate crisis. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. There is no such thing as a climate crisis. What's the matter with me? There's no such thing as a climate crisis. It's not going on. It's just the liberal Democrats who insist that there's a climate crisis. So because so much is going on the planet, so much that we are doing and so much that we are ignoring, that yes, I think that the visitors from other locations in the cosmos are coming here with increasing frequency, and their purpose is twofold. I think to witness, number one, how civilizations can do themselves in if they're not careful, and number two, without directly interfering, but indirectly perhaps influencing the movement, the evolution of our species, hopefully to bring an end to our own self-destructive behaviors. So they do so in many, many ways, in stories that they may put on film or encourage filmmakers to put in novels that they put into books, in the teachings of some enlightened messengers and teachers throughout the world, and in programs such as the one you're doing right now. So, I do believe that highly evolved beings are assisting us in every way they can without violating the prime directive. And I think that the prime directive that's talked about in Star Trek happens to be actually operational in the universe, which is that no species is supposed to influence another species in a direct sense by changing the course of events, but is allowed to perhaps produce ideas, thought streams, concepts, and levels of awareness that could assist a species in stopping its own self-annihilation.
Definitely, and not to get in this too heavily, but we've done shows on the whole Skinwalker Ranch thing, and there's a book by a guy named Chris Bledsoe called UFO of God, and it's in the Christian section on Amazon. If you ever get bored and want to be entertained, look at it. But it's pretty interesting. He claims he can summon UFOs, and they seem kind of like light spears or something like that. But the book has like 5 stars and is doing well. But the Skinwalker Ranch show has all these government. It's on the History Channel. There's one beyond Skinwalker Ranch, and there's Skinwalker Ranch, and there's obvious phenomenon going on at this ranch that's very weird, like a portal. Like they're always getting weird stuff there that's just crazy weird. But to close that part out, because I don't want to get into it too heavily, there's all these military people there too, like uh, Colonel John Alexander and Utah head whatever of governor. Like that's why that show's so weird. That's the weirdest show on all this stuff that we're talking about that I've seen ever on TV. That's just creepy because there's so many government spooks on it, and then they're like really talking, getting footage of crazy UFO stuff. So it's definitely we've reached a crazy point in our history with all this stuff for sure, and the media. And even that show, the last one, ended saying there's a base there and they don't know if the government put it there underground or if aliens did. And they're sitting there with former Robert Bigelow security, and he was someone that bought that ranch a long time ago and studied it for the government and stuff like that. But just basically, just things are definitely crazy when it comes to the UFO stuff lately for sure. But
I
one
think it's
thing
only, Jeffrey, to interrupt you, I think it's only a matter of time. I think it's inevitable. I think it's only a matter of time before the existence of so-called UFOs and what we call aliens uh, becomes widely known, widely accepted, widely embraced, actually, and widely experienced on this planet. Just a matter of time. My hope is that we will get to that place sooner rather than later, because the sooner we do, the faster will be our self-healing, in my experience.
yes. And I've noticed that with people that I've interviewed that you've read, like I've read your book since, for a long time. And I noticed like when you've immersed yourself with someone, then you interview them, you deal with more nerves with that. And another person that I've interviewed is Joe R. Lansdale, who I've read since like elementary school, that writes a lot of fiction. But I was curious, when you get bombarded with anxiety and stuff like that, is there anything you do to try to deal with it on some level? Like anything, any process you go through to get rid of it? Or I know there's one thing I've seen, that only little prayer you need, where you can ask God to like transform your anxiety and negativity into something positive. That helps, but it still seems like it comes back eventually on some level.
Well, Jeffrey, this is going to sound terribly arrogant, and I hope it doesn't come off that way. But honestly and truly, I don't experience moments of great anxiety anymore, not since my conversations with God experience. I did for the first 50 years of my life, no question about that. But since the conversations with God encounter, I can't honestly say that I experience, moments of great, huge anxiety. I simply don't. Help me to understand the prayer that I say when I'm moving toward the edge of anxiety, when I start becoming a little bit fearful or a little bit nervous about something. I say my favorite prayer that God gave me and offered me to use. God, help me to understand that this problem has already been solved for me. And I've been saying that prayer consistently now for 30 years. I'll repeat it so people can write it down. Help me to understand, God, that this problem has already been solved for me. And you know what? I have to tell you something interesting, Jeffrey. We all face problems and challenges in our life, and I've faced many more even since the books came out, like all of us. But I have to tell you that of every 10 things that I worried about, numerically speaking, I'd be surprised if even one of the 10 actually came to pass. Usually 8 or 9 of the 10 never really occurred. Either the problems solved themselves, through a process that was a little bit sometimes mysterious and miraculous, or they were not problematical at all, and I was simply looking at them the wrong way. So I've come to the conclusion, I'm an older guy now, I'm not a young man, but at the age of 80, I've come to the conclusion that worry is simply prayer misdirected. So I simply don't allow myself to worry about very many things. Do I show concern? Yes. Concern and worry are two different energetics.
Definitely. I understand what you mean. I've used the I am that I am too. That helps on some level. And I know there was a Wayne Dyer and like meditation with that one. That was pretty interesting and good to listen to. Uh, we got about, let's see, about 9 minutes. Is there anything you'd like to share, or anything from God that you're feeling to share in the last 9 minutes?
Well, there are two things I could share. Number one, I could share the 6-step process that allows people to have their own conversation with God or move closer to it. Step
Okay.
number one is possibility. We have to admit and acknowledge and embrace that it's possible to have a conversation with God. That there is, number one, possible that it's possible that there is an entity called God, and number two, or an essential essence that we refer to as the highest power. And number two, we have to acknowledge that if there is a higher power, that it is possible that that higher power, that source, will communicate with all of us, not just with the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury or the chief ulama or the head rabbi or someone who's supposedly sacred and holy, but in fact would communicate with ordinary, everyday, average people. So that's step number two, which is worthiness. Step number one, possibility. Is it possible that God is talking to all of us all the time? Step number two, can I embrace the fact that I am worthy, just as worthy as the so-called sacred people, just as worthy as the so-called spiritual masters, just as worthy as anyone else on this planet to receive direct communication with God? So we need to embrace our own worthiness. Yes, I am worthy of God talking to me, and she's doing so all the time. Step number three, willingness. Once we decide that we are worthy, are we willing to actually receive communications directly from the divine? Or are we not willing to do so because we think it's either sacrilegious or blasphemy or heresy or whatever our religions have told us? Because religions have told us that it's not okay. It's not okay to walk around saying God talks to me directly. Religions tell us that's blasphemy, that's heresy. And by the way, in certain countries of the world, making such statements can get you into real trouble. Theological trouble and political trouble as well. So we have to move into a place of willingness to receive conversations with God. Step number four, wakefulness, to stay awake, to allow ourselves to be aware when those communications are coming to us, because God communicates with us in 100 different ways across 1,000 moments in 1,000,000 lifetimes. Not just one way, not just like, whispering in your ear, if you please, but in many, many ways. A feeling we might have, a sudden feeling that comes over us, or a vision that occurs to us, or light beings that appear to be arising from our house and going up into the heavens, or whatever the way might be. So stay awake. Don't fall asleep at the switch. Step number five, acceptance. Once you receive a direct communication from the divine, do not reject it and say, it's just my imagination. It's just a coincidence. No, it didn't really. It didn't really have to be a communication from the divine. Don't set it aside and pay no attention to it. Accept it for what it is and what it was. And step number six, discernment. To be able to discern the difference between communications from the highest power in the universe and information that's coming to us from the limited facility that we call the human mind. So those six steps are described in much greater detail with examples and so forth in the book titled God Talk. If people want to know more about how they can move closer to their own conversation with God, I do encourage them to obtain the book God Talk.
And yes, as experiences of humanity's connections with a higher power, common sentience, and Sacred Stories Publishing. and they have lots of interesting titles. Like I said, there's a shamanism one, a light being one. There's like one on ancestors and all kinds of stuff. So check that out. God Talk is Amazon, and you can find it most anywhere, I'm sure. Well, Neil, it's been great. It's a pleasure to have you back on. And is there a website or anything else? And we appreciate it so much.
Yes, people can reach me if they want to stay connected to the messages of Conversations with God at cwgconnect.com. They'll find me there, and I'm there every day at a platform called Ask Neil, where you can ask me any question you want, and I'll give you a written response, usually within 24 hours and or less. The final statement I'd like to offer is the most important message I received in Conversations with God. I said to God, what is it I don't understand? Just give it to me straight. And God said, Neil, it's really very simple. You think your life is about you, and your life has nothing to do with you. Your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But when you understand that that is what your life is really about, you will come across a larger universal understanding that, of course, what you do for another, you do for yourself, because in the largest sense, in the universal sense, your life is about you for an astonishing reason. There's only one of us in the room.
We appreciate it so much. Thank you, and look forward to your future works. And thanks so much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's been a joy to be here with you, and I appreciate the invitation. And once again, thank you for all that you're doing.
All right. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
All right, everybody. You're listening to United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. And sitting in here with the dog.